Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Pokémon Crystal. I have played this game many times, but this is my first time playing it on the Virtual Console for the Nintendo 3DS. I actually got this game originally for the Game Boy Color the year that it came out, 2001, so I was probably 9 or 10 years old at the time. This is the first Pokemon game that does let you actually play as a girl, because who'da thunk it, girls play video games too. For nostalgia's sake, I chose to play as the girl, and I just gave her the default name as Chris, because in most Pokemon games, the default name is usually the color of the game that they came from. So in Pokemon Red, the default name is Red, and Pokemon Blue, it's Blue, and so on and so forth. You are also able to choose your rival's name, and this is probably a shared experience with a lot of people, but when you first encounter your rival, it has the name question mark, because the idea is that you get to choose who your rival's name is. So afterwards, after you talk to the police, because your rival had stolen one of Professor Birch's starter Pokemon, you have to identify what what your rival's name is. And so as a kid, I always thought you were supposed to manually enter in question mark, because that is what the name stated during the encounter with the text box. And so I thought it'd be a hoot to do that again, because I feel like a lot of children made that mistake back in the day as well. This is the first Pokemon game that had animated sprites, and my mind was blown when I first saw this as a 9 or 10-year-old. You encounter the enemy, and they move a little bit, and it just brought so much more life into the game, where all of these Pokemon, they're actually moving. Hitmonchan will do little punches, or Spearow might flap its wings, and so it was really fun when this game first came out, actually seeing that feature. That feature alone probably made the upgrade from Pokemon Gold and Silver to Crystal worth it for me. So for this second generation, it's kind of like an overall theme. Whenever you're talking to like NPC characters or the professor, they always tell you that you should play with your favorite Pokemon and not necessarily worry about strengths or weaknesses. And so I chose to really dive into that kind of vibe and just pick out Pokemon that sounded fun to me, and maybe Pokemon that I normally wouldn't use. And so when picking out my starter, I actually chose to go for the least popular one, which is Chikorita. Normally when I play through the second generation games, I will pick Cyndaquil or Totodile, because they are, in my opinion, maybe a little more awesome and definitely more useful than Chikorita. And so I felt bad that Chikorita goes unnoticed so often. So I chose Chikorita, and Chikorita definitely has some problems as I played through the game. The first problem that I encountered was for the first gym leader, Falkner, who uses Flying type. And if you don't know, Flying type is super effective against grass. And ideally, you would just pick up a different Pokemon along the way to help cover your grass starter's weaknesses. But I felt like the options from the first starting town to the first gym leader in terms of Pokemon was lacking, and I didn't really find anything that was super effective against Flying type along the way. Now there is a NPC in the town with the first gym leader who offers to trade you a Onix, and Rock is super effective against Flying. So I think he wanted, I can't remember what he wanted. He wanted like a Spinarak or something like that. So anyway, I hunted the Pokemon that he wanted to trade, and I traded him, and I got the Onix named Rocky. Now this is all well and good, but when I started leveling up Rocky in order to take down Falkner, I came to find out that traded Pokemon past the level 10 do not respect you enough and do not listen to you unless you have the first 2 gym badges. So Rocky ended up being completely useless to me and kind of a waste of time leveling him up. So eventually I just bit the bullet and I got my Chikorita up to level 14 or 15, and by then I was strong enough to take Falkner down. Along this way, while I was grinding up Chikorita's level, I also picked up a level 2 Zubat, because in these older Pokemon games, I feel like you definitely need to have at least one water type Pokemon in order to surf and navigate the water, and one flying type Pokemon in order to access the HM Fly to fast travel between all the different cities. So I thought it would be really cool to use a Crobat as my flying type, and so I picked up Zubat. So I took down the first gym leader using an over-leveled Chikorita and Zubat, and then by then the game did start getting progressively easier. Along the way, I also got the level level 20 Eevee from Bill. I think I vastly underestimated how long the friendship evolutions work for both Eevee and Golbat, because this game also introduced friendship evolutions where if you use a Pokemon enough, if you battle with them, if you're winning the battles and giving them items, their friendship level increases, and then once their friendship level reaches a certain threshold, then these Pokemon would evolve. So I wanted to use a Crobat, and I wanted to get an Umbreon. Now, Golbat took a really long time to finally evolve into Crobat, and by then I had traversed through most of Johto. Johto is the region of this second generation. By the time I got a Crobat, I definitely didn't need Fly as much anymore because I had already explored through most of the map, but I was grateful to finally have access to the HM Fly. As far as Umbreon went, I pretty much went the whole game with an Eevee, and for some reason he just wasn't evolving until the very end. After I beat the Pokemon League, after I did all the post-game stuff that I want to talk about, that's when I finally got the Umbreon. So I definitely regret using an Eevee as my 6th Pokemon slot because I felt like he was one of the weaker additions to my party, and I wasn't able to utilize the dark typings of Umbreon because he hadn't evolved yet. Now, Pokemon Crystal introduces this item called the Odd Egg, and so the second generation introduces breeding Pokemon in order to get Pokemon eggs, and this whole breeding system has like this whole complex dynamic in that like the baby Pokemon gets like the stats of the mother and the shiny chance of the father. Anyway, it's this whole system. And so at the beginning, when you first talk to the daycare man, he gives you an item called an Odd Egg. And this is unique to Pokemon Crystal specifically, not Gold and Silver, but the Odd Egg has I think it's 16% chance of being a shiny baby Pokemon, which were introduced during the second generation. Now, Gold, Silver, and Crystal have this glitch where you can duplicate Pokemon. And so once I got the Odd Egg, I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of shiny hunting with this increased 16% chance of getting a shiny. And I duplicated a bunch of these Odd Eggs, and I started hatching them one after another. By the time I got through maybe my 10th or 11th shiny egg, I finally got a shiny Elekid, which is probably the least best shiny Pokemon in terms of the selection that can hatch out of these eggs, in my opinion, because Elekid and Electabuzz, the shiny color palette is very similar to their regular color palette. But by then, I was sick of duplicating these Odd Eggs and running around trying to hatch them. And so I settled for my shiny Elekid, but I also grabbed a regular Smoochum along the way to add to my party because I thought it was really cool to play through the beginning of the game with not only my starter type, but I now have an electric type and a psychic/ice type on my team, all pretty early into the game. Smoochum and Elekid do not evolve into their next form until level 30, and this game takes a long time for your Pokemon to level up because it's basically split into 2 different games, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But for most of the game, I was rocking an Eevee, a Golbat, a Smoochum, and an Elekid, which they ended up pulling their weight, but they were still baby Pokemon, and I really wanted these guys to evolve sooner than they did. In addition to this, my water type, in order to help me navigate the water, I ended up picking up a Mantine of all Pokemon. And Mantine is normally a Pokemon that I tend to overlook, but I've come to really appreciate Mantine, probably because he had access to the really strong ability Surf. And if you've never played through any of these second generation games before, access to strong abilities is very sparse. And so the ability to use Surf automatically made Mantine kind of a little bit of a powerhouse, in all honesty. Now, I do like Mantine's design. I particularly like his mouth, and he's got these like chubby little cheeks. I think he looks really cool, and he's definitely gotten higher up on the Pokemon list having used him on my team this playthrough. The 4 times weakness to electricity was definitely a red flag though when using him. So yeah, by the end of the game, once all the Pokemon were evolved and I finally got access to some strong abilities, abilities. For instance, did you know that Jinx never learned Psychic leveling up in the second generation? Or Meganium, the final evolution for Chikorita, the only grass ability that I ever had access to from him is Razor Leaf of all abilities. And so the grass typing starter is definitely lacking in Generation 2. Now, I was able to find the Earthquake TM and give him strength, so he did still have some abilities, but he didn't have any strong grass abilities to take advantage of the Stab, which is basically if a Pokemon of a type uses a move of the same type, it will cause extra damage. Now, this game also introduced day and night cycles, which is kind of how you evolve Eevee. For instance, if Eevee wants to evolve during the day, it will turn into an Espeon. If it evolves during the night, it will turn into Umbreon. And other systems also take advantage of this, and it also knows what day of the week it is. So certain events take place during certain days. So if I wanted to increase the friendship of my Golbat or my Eevee, I could wait to a certain day and give it a haircut in order to increase its friendship levels. There's also little things like bug contests where you are going out into the park and trying to catch the rarest bug. There's certain NPCs that will give you a certain item if you talk to them on a certain day. I mostly played during night because I work during the day, which I actually prefer because I think more rare Pokemon come out during the night compared to the day. Really though, the coolest thing that Gold, Silver, and Crystal had going for them is once you get all 8 badges in Johto and you take on the Pokemon League, you can now roam through Kanto, which is the region of the first games Red, Blue, and Yellow. Now, this is always a big selling point for this generation. However, I should note that it's kind of a diet version of Kanto, where in order to probably fit everything into the game, they had to make a lot of cutbacks to Kanto. A lot of the tunnels were closed off, and a lot of the exploration and towers are closed off. And so, yes, you can explore Kanto, and yes, you can battle all of the 8 gym leaders, but it's not like you're playing through a full playthrough of Red, Blue, or Yellow. It is kind of cool though, because this is almost like a direct sequel of the first games, which Pokemon has never really done this since. Each game tends to be its own standalone region, and it takes place during its own time. So it was fun traversing across Kanto because it's kind of like a where are they now situation, where you get to see where some of the gym leaders wound up, or how Kanto fared after the main protagonist in the first games, named Red, after he became champion. And you'll talk to some of the NPCs, and they'll kind of hint at Red being missing, and we don't know where Red is, or they'll talk about like what the champion did when he was playing through the game, or I guess it's not a game to him, but you know what I mean. It's also kind of sad because some areas did not fare so well. For instance, Cinnabar Island, the volcano erupted, and so Blaine or Blaze, the gym leader there, pretty much lost his gym, and you have to hunt him down in a cave in order to duke it out with him. But it is pretty cool where the main antagonist in the first generation games, Blue, he actually wound up being the 8th gym leader to replace Giovanni. And Giovanni, it was the big bad guy. He was basically the leader of Team Rocket in the first game. And in the second game, Team Rocket's still around, and they're trying to find Giovanni. They're trying to, like, they hijack the radio tower in order to try and get Giovanni to come back, but they're not nearly as much of a threat as they were in the first game. And so it's cool that we get to see where Blue's at, but really the most hype moment in this game is you actually get to duke it out with the main protagonist, Red, from the first game, after you defeat all 8 gym leaders in Kanto. And he doesn't say anything. He's just in this secluded cave, and when you go up and talk to him, he doesn't say anything. It's just an ellipsis, and then you just battle. And this is the most difficult battle of the game. I actually did not attempt to do this battle this playthrough because I would have to grind up my guy's levels so high. I think his highest level Pokemon is obviously a Pikachu, and it's level 80 or something like that, and my guys were just barely barely touching level 50 by the time I decided to wrap this playthrough up. So didn't play through it this time, but it's certainly one of the coolest aspects of this game, being able to battle the first protagonist that you play through in the first games. In addition to battling Red, there is some other post-content stuff that you can do. For instance, in Pokemon Crystal specifically, they let you battle Suicune, and Suicune does not run away, and so I was able to snag me a Suicune. In addition to this, you can also supposedly find Entei and Raikou out in the wild, and these guys are notoriously difficult to catch. You pretty much get like one turn to either damage them or try and catch them, and then they roar or they run away. But the good news is, once you do see them once, you are able to use the Pokedex to track them in some sense. And so I spent maybe like half an hour just trying to find them in the wild so that I could track them with my Pokedex, or I still had my Master Ball at the time, so just trying to catch one of them with the Master Ball, but I lost interest after about half an hour. You can also go get a Lugia and a Ho-Oh. However, Ho-Oh, you need to catch all 3 of the legendary cats in order to encounter Ho-Oh, so obviously since I didn't catch all 3 of the cats, then I wasn't able to duke it out with Ho-Oh. This particular version of Pokemon Crystal on the Virtual Console for the Nintendo 3DS allows you to have access to a unique item called the GS Ball, and the GS Ball is an item that lets you encounter and catch a Celebi. Now, the GS Ball was in the Japanese version of Pokemon Crystal, however, you needed to do some roundabout thing, like connect it to a phone and get it to connect to the internet. I'm not too sure on the details, but can you imagine what that process would have been in 2001 when most people probably did not have access to the internet? And so it's cool that they brought this into the Virtual Console so that us Americans can play through, and we don't have to do this roundabout modem phone thing either in order to encounter a Celebi. So I did catch a Celebi, and I do plan on transferring that and my main party members up to Pokemon Home. I forgot how annoying it is to deal with certain mechanics and systems in these old games. For instance, managing your boxes of Pokemon can get quite tedious, and boxes are basically these storage slots, these folders if you will, that can hold up to 20 Pokemon in your PC. However, these boxes do not automatically switch out to an empty box when you fill up a box. So for instance, if I was to catch 20 Pokemon and fill up a box, and then I was to catch one more before I change the box, then I guess that Pokemon's lost forever. Unlike the newer games where the Pokemon just fill up the next box once the first box is filled up. So it was annoying, plus you have to save the game every time you switch your box. This is actually the main core of cloning your Pokemon. You put them in a PC, and then you switch the box and it saves, and then you reset right when it's saving, and so then you have one in the PC and you have one in your party. And so it's just tedious trying to like manage your Pokemon, especially if you're trying to get out like a Pokemon that knows Cut or Flash or some HM Pokemon that you need just for that specific situation, and it's just tedious. So I definitely appreciate the newer Pokemon games where you can just swap out your Pokemon from your PC on the fly and you don't need to navigate to a Pokemon Center or anything like that. Definitely a high quality of life change that they added to the newer Pokemon games. Also, there's no way to like relearn moves in this generation, and so I accidentally taught my Meganium a move that ended up not being so strong. I think it was Synthesis, where Synthesis is a move that supposedly heals up your Pokemon, and in newer Pokemon games, I feel like Synthesis heals you up a lot more than in this generation, and so I ended up not wanting Synthesis, and I wanted my Leech Life, or it was some other move that I ended up changing, but there's no way to like relearn your moves in this game as far as I understand, whereas compare that to like Pokemon Arceus, where I can just have any 4 moves that Pokemon has access to at any time. It's so much better. Also, on the topic of moves, it doesn't tell you the specifics on what a move does. It doesn't tell you the power or the accuracy of each move. This is something that you have to look up on your own. It just gives you like a basic description of the move, and that's it. So like if my Jinx wants to learn Confusion, I don't know like how strong Confusion is until I look it up. And one of my last complaints about this generation in particular, the Gold, Silver, and Crystal, is that my Pokemon level up so slowly. Where in the first generation, and I feel like all the other generations after this, by the time you reach the Pokemon League, your Pokemon should be around level 50. But my Pokemon were still in the 30s, and even the gym leaders were only between level 40 and 50. And I feel like this is because they intended on you playing through Kanto and leveling up your Pokemon up to level 50 there. However, this also brings up another problem where all of the levels in Kanto are just kind of off. Like it's weird going from battling the Pokemon champion Lance, who has like a level 50 Dragonite, to going against the gym leaders who only have like level 35 Pokemon, along with all the trainers. Most of the trainers you're looking at level 35 to 40 Pokemon as well. Don't even think about leveling up against all of the wild Pokemon in the grass, because they saw the same levels that they did in the first generation, where you're fighting a bunch of level 5 Pidgeys. And so that's another reason why I didn't feel like grinding my Pokemon up in order to finally battle against Red. I'd just be playing through the Elite Four over and over again in order to level my Pokemon up. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of problems, but realistically, I have so much nostalgia and love and respect for this game. Can you imagine me as a 9-year-old playing through this? I was just enamored with all the new Pokemon. Before this game came out, I remember hearing about all the new Pokemon, like Pika Blue, who ended up being Meryl, and the first time that the images of the first 3 starters dropped, and I just remember spending countless nights daydreaming like which starter I'm going to pick when I finally do get this game. This is one of my favorite games and generations, despite its flaws, just because I have like so much nostalgia and bias for it. And so every time I boot up a Gold, Silver, or Crystal game, I get so excited just because I have such fondness for it. Overall, I'm going to give this game a 4 out of 5. If you are like me and you have played through these games before, you know exactly what I'm talking about with that nostalgia. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Pokemon Crystal, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!